Hey guys, welcome to another Moy Style podcast. Today I got Justin Williams. He's the owner of OKC Academy in Oklahoma City. And this topic, I feel like he will be the right fit for this topic because it talks about the health of the arm of the kids when it comes to pitching, like overusing their arms in games and everything else. So, Justin, how about we get started with kind of tell me a little bit about yourself and then obviously why you would fit so well for this conversation.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. So, I started my career like everybody else playing youth baseball up through college. High school, went to junior college, was drafted out of Seward County Community College in 2000. So quite a 20 years ago now. Went and played in the minor leagues, had some arm issues in the minor leagues, decided to come back home and start my life and had some kids, and I've gone all the way from, 4U to 14U baseball once. And I've got a 5-year-old and I'm getting ready to do it again. So
Right.
I've coached youth baseball for 10 years. Ever since I've had, my arm issues, I've always continued my education on arm care and injuries and why they happen. And so I feel like that kind of makes me a great fit for what you're trying to get at today with your topic.
Yeah, and I've known you for a while now, and I know how passionate you are about this. And honestly, I've been picking up your brain on some of this stuff, pretty much how to get the kids ready, how to keep them healthy all year round. So, the first question I wanna ask you today is gonna be about kind of like the overall thought that you have on like what youth baseball looks like, pitching youth baseball looks like for you today.
So probably in the last 5 years, it's really gotten a lot worse than it used to be. And what I mean by that is there's more desire to win than there is desire to do things the right way from an arm health perspective. You've got, kids throwing 35 pitches day one, then 50 pitches day two. So back-to-back days, I'm not a big fan of. We can talk about that in detail around the pitch count portion later. But or they're just throwing guys that are 12 years old, 100 pitches. I talked to a kid yesterday. They got beat by a team in a tournament, and that team threw an 11-year-old or 12-year-old 104 pitches. So
That's great.
I mean, they're just, coaches are doing things to win, and it's at the expense of the youth players' health, whether it be now or whether it be like mine, where my career got cut short at the very best part.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy though, because I've seen it myself. I coach youth baseball, and I know how crazy and how intense the coach can get, and the parents as well. They want to win so much that that trophy, that plastic trophy or the ring, and then they end up overthrowing the kid out there for no reason. Then later on, the kid gets hurt, and so so let's go ahead and also go into curveballs. So, like, what do you think about kids throwing curveballs at a young age, or what age do you recommend them starting? And once they start throwing curveballs, how many do you recommend per outing once they start off or they start throwing curveballs?
Man, we could have a whole nother topic and whole nother podcast on that question, but I'll try to keep it brief.
Right.
So first and foremost, a pitcher needs to, if I'm talking like an 11-year-old pitcher, if your 11-year-old pitcher is not above 55% strike percentage, you don't even need to be thinking about a curveball. If you can't locate a fastball, you don't need to be even thinking about a curveball, because walks are going to kill you anyways.
Right.
But after you're above 55% strike ratio with a fastball, you got to be able to do the same thing with a changeup. So you really got to master those two before you even start throwing a curveball in a game. Now, from a safety perspective, when I grew up, it was, hey, you don't throw a curveball till you've got hair on your face, like saying that, a kid needs to get
Right.
There's some studies out that a lot of these coaches that really want to win will cite, right? They will say, hey, there's studies out that show that a curveball, applies less force to the elbow than a fastball. And listen, I'm all about studies and measurements, and I'm always constantly learning still to this day. So I like those studies. I like what they have to say. But the coach that tells me that in justifying them throwing a curveball just threw a kid 100 pitches. So that study also says, if you want to like read between the lines, that a fastball is the most harmful, right? So you got the coach saying, hey, we can throw curveballs at 11 or 12 years old because these studies give us permission to, essentially. But the studies also show that fastball is the worst thing for you, but then they throw a kid 100 pitches. So that coach can't have it both ways, right? So what I do with our guys is we start learning like close distance, like 10 feet away from each other, and start learning grip and how it comes out. And we do some different drills to make sure they're throwing it the right way. I think that's the most important thing is, and I don't want to get off the rails here, but I think it's a real important, like high level piece that like not a lot of people understand is pronation of the hand versus supination. So if you think of pronation, like think of a circle change and how you would throw that circle down and how your wrist would turn inward when you release the ball. When you throw a fastball, your fastball doesn't snap. It actually also turns inward. And that's natural arm motion of protecting elbow and shoulder. The same thing happens with a properly thrown curveball. It releases out here, you finish, and then it turns in. Like if you look at MLB, slow motion pitchers throwing a curveball. The problem is so many kids, when they think of curveball, they think of like really like wrapping up this wrist and they end up supinating going this way, which is really bad for elbow and shoulder. So that's why it's so important to like learn how to throw it properly so you can still fall into the pronation piece. So many people get caught up in really trying to hook around that ball and they get on the side of it and end up throwing a frisbee slider and not a curveball, but you're raking across that ball, which is applying a lot more stress because you're not decelerating the arm in a natural way.
Right, that's a good point because it's not even just throwing curveballs, even knowing how to throw the curveballs, which is I think could be even worse. So that's what a lot of coaches don't take in consideration. They say, well, the experts say that we can throw curveballs, so go ahead and throw a bunch of them out there. Right. So I think they need to learn how to throw it first to even before they even think about doing it in the game. So, okay, so what do you think injuries really come from?
Oh man, this is a great topic. I had a conversation with two high school coaches watching the last World Series game, and I asked them, I said, do you guys understand like what happens and where like these injuries, especially elbow injuries, come from? And elbow injuries stem from weak shoulders. And people were like, what do you mean? Like, how does that make sense? And I'll explain it. So you have, and I'll just try to dumb it down and not go crazy with ligament names and muscle names or anything, but think about the muscles that encase and ligaments that encase your joint and your shoulder. Okay. When you go to throw, when that arm comes up and the body rotates, I'll do it sideways. The arm actually lays back. I can't do it because I'm old, but my wrist and my elbow would be like parallel to the ground. Okay. So that's called layback. So when you lay back, your elbow where the UCL is, that opens up. The more layback you have, the more that opens up in your elbow. So having maximum layback back here is not necessarily a good thing. Okay. You need to have strength up here that allows you to get some layback, but not go too far. Because if you go too far, this opens up too much. And now you're ripping your UCL, or you're tearing your growth plate off your elbow. Okay, so when you talk about a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, and you talk about them throwing a lot in a tournament, so it's not just, hey, you're a Sunday pitcher, you're pitching the championship game Sunday night at 8:00. That guy may have played 6 games up to that point that weekend, right? So all of that throwing, and now we ask him to do something that is extremely hard from a stress perspective on his arm, right? what people don't
Right.
realize is as you throw, your range of motion in your shoulder gets weaker as you throw. The more you throw, so your range of motion increases, which again opens up
Right.
the elbow, right? So the more you throw, the weaker this gets, the more this opens up, and the more you're going to start having elbow problems. So all the kids that complain with this elbow pain right here, that's an overuse thing. It's overuse, and their shoulder's not strong enough to prevent maximum layback. So when we talk
Right.
about arm care, and we talk about all the different things that we do and the band exercises, it strengthens this up, so
Right.
you're able to absorb more stress from throwing and maintain range of motion without increasing range of motion. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I got that from you when it came to the bands. I know you mentioned the bands a little bit. But that's pretty good point, because the weaker you are here, the farther you can go back this way, and that's what costs a lot.
And it opens up that
injuries in
elbow joint. And what a lot of people don't know also is the UCL, like the ligament that's right here, right? It attaches to the growth plate, and your growth plate is actually in like an 10, 11, 12-year-old, that growth plate is still maturing, and it's weaker than the ligament is. So if you apply maximum stress, instead of the ligament tearing or fraying or snapping, the growth plate's going to fracture on the elbow and pull off the elbow. And you know, 3 or 4 years ago, that's career ending. And now they have surgeries they can do where they screw that growth plate back in the elbow. But man, like I saw 3 11-year-olds last season in slings with that same growth plate injury. And it's all due to overuse. It's due to overuse. So I consider overuse throwing more than you're conditioned for. If you're not on an armband program, your pitch count should not be more than 40 pitches, no matter your age. Like if you really want to protect somebody. So it's not that a pitch count goes up by age. You have to be doing all the right stuff to get to those higher pitch counts.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I'm not trying to get off subject here, but when you got drafted with the Padres, right? How hard were you throwing back then?
So it's interesting you asked that question. So in high school, I was setting 89, 90. I went through 2 years of junior college. I think I topped out around 93, 94 in junior college. Topped out 95, 96 in the minor leagues. So here's my point for youth players is when I'm sitting 95, 96, and I hit 97 once or twice, right? And today that's like average. Right. But if you go back and look at average fastball speed around the year 2000, the average major league fastball was 93 miles an hour, and I'm sitting there above that, right? So my trajectory is like, man, like if I just keep at it, like I've got a good shot at making the MLB. Well, then know my shoulder, my muscles and my up here in my shoulder, the rotator cuff, and everything kind of it stretched out. So it wasn't like a tear; it just got too loose up there from all the overuse. I've got news articles from when I played in high school that says, Justin Williams threw 8 complete innings and 170 pitches. Like just crazy stuff that and being overused, because good pitchers get overused by coaches that don't know what they're doing because the coach wants to win the game. And a lot of your injuries are going to happen, up front. But like mine, my career got taken away from me when I was one step away.
Right. That's why I asked, because, I knew you threw hard. So I feel like the harder you throw, the better chance you got to get hurt. So and you got hurt. What age did you get hurt? Like when you ended your career?
23 maybe. Yeah, about 22, 23.
Yeah, that's pretty young to end the baseball career. That's crazy. Well, now you mentioned about pitching multiple days, so you're not a big fan of that. So if let's say they do pitch multiple days, what do you recommend? I know it's a bit different for age.
Yeah, so there is like kind of one exception to the rule about pitching multiple days in a row. And it's in my 10 years coaching youth, it's happened one time. You know, pitchers are not always on their A game, and good coaches can see after the first 2 or 3 hitters, and they can, you know, like my antennas are going up that, hey, like this guy doesn't have his normal stuff. And we were in a game. It was a first bracket game. My number one was throwing. He's like 12 pitches deep, and he's gone like 1 strike over 12 pitches. Normally, this guy's a 65% strike guy. So I go out and I talk to him. I'm like, hey, like, I'm gonna after like it's 3-1 on this batter, and I'm like, hey, like if you walk this guy, I'm gonna give you 1 more. I was like, and it's no like we need to figure out if you've got your A game, like if you can work out of this or not. But there's no point in you walking batters and me running you 50, 60 pitches just because you're my number one and you go 2 innings instead of 5 innings, right? And we lose this game. Like what I would rather do is I would rather shut you down less than 20 pitches and like let's let you pitch tomorrow. You know, because if a guy throws under 20 pitches, he can pitch tomorrow. But so if his max pitch limit is like 65, right, then I'm going to probably keep him around 55 just to be safe. Right?
So both days combined?
No, I'm going to keep him 55 on the next day. If he goes like 20 on the first day,
right,
the rest that he's going to get overnight is going to help offset some of that. So I just kind of shave off 10 from what his max would be on a normal outing and let him go day 2.
I got you. Okay.
So I ended up I gave him 1 more batter. He walked that guy, brought in my number 2 who won that game for us. And I didn't even pitch that guy the next day because usually what I found as a pitcher is, man, if I'm off, like I'm going to be off all day that day. Like it's not, you know, the next game, it's not really going to make it any better. Let me get a night's sleep and kind of reset mentally. Right. So we did that and we brought him back. This was a tournament that was over multiple days. So we brought him back on day 2 and he dominated. Even the umpire was like, before the game, telling the field umpire, like, hey, you haven't seen this kid pitch. He's going to dominate this team. And then he goes out there and he walks like 4 guys. Right. So,
right.
So yeah, so that's the exception to the rule to me. If it's sub 20, then you can pitch the next day.
Right. And I mean, that's a good point because sometimes I think a lot of coaches think, let's say their max is 60 pitches or 55 pitches. So they're like, okay, we're going to go half today. We're going to go half tomorrow and we'll be okay. And
think back to the weakness that happens in your shoulder. So, and I don't want to go on a tangent here, but armcare.com has a great platform. Found those guys about a year ago. We use it a lot. They have a dynamometer that you hook up to your wrist and it measures force. So you lay on the ground and you press your wrist into the wall this way and you press your wrist into the wall backwards. So you do like a baseline test. Then we took a guy and we threw him like 40 pitches and we tested them after that. And you can see a decrease in their strength, which again, decrease in strength means now I have more range of motion, which opens us up more, right? So that's the problem in taking a guy 30 or 40 pitches and then pitching him the next day is his arm has not recovered strength-wise. So it's worse than it was. And then you're asking him to throw another 40 pitches.
Right. Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, which I'm not going to say names, but I was playing a couple of years ago. I was playing in the World Series. And this kid, I mean, he was a pretty good pitcher, the lefty. And he was already, I think, at the championship because they didn't have anybody else because they came through the losing bracket. So now they don't have anybody else, so they have to use their best guy. And I remember he was about, don't quote me on this, but it was somewhere around 140, 150 pitches. And I even went up to the guy. I was like, you're gonna stop this? And so I was about to forfeit the game just to save that kid's, career. Just because
that's what I was gonna bring up. How you have a good coach, and you were the opposing coach that was gonna forfeit it, right?
Right.
So I had we were about 12, and it was the first game of the fall. So pitch counts were a little down, like where I was gonna keep them at, and we used one too many pitchers in pool play to get through pool play.
Right.
And I told my guys, I was like, hey, based on pitch counts and based on how many pitchers we have left and how many games, like I think we had We had 3 games left, and I had 5 pitchers. I normally need 6 pitchers. I need 2 per game, right? But I'm like, we may get to that game, go halfway through it with that one guy, and when he hits his pitch count number, we're just going to forfeit.
Right.
Because I'm not going to risk his injury, and I'm not going to throw somebody else on short rest to change the color of the ring we're going to win. So how you know you have a good coach is if a coach is willing to forfeit a championship game for the health of his players.
Right. It's kind of funny because I was interviewing Coach Ross last week, and I know you know him. And one of the things that he was talking about was I don't really care how many trophies you got in youth baseball. All I care is where you're at right now. Which that's
a great point, because when these kids go to their junior high tryout,
the
coach is going to evaluate them on their 5 tools then and there. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're having tryouts on Tuesday. Bring me all of your rings so I can see how good a player you are." That doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. At least I've never seen it before. But
and you won't ever see it.
Right.
You won't ever see it.
Okay, so that brings us into the next question, which is the MLB pitching guidelines, which I feel like some coaches want to compare that to youth baseball, and I don't think that's even close.
Whenever I get in I'll call them conversations on Facebook about pitch counts and stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, well, this MLB guide said my kid can throw 80 pitches." Well, if you really want to understand what your kid is conditioned for from a health perspective, get a dynamometer, get the armcare.com app, do a fresh test, see where his measurements are, and then do a test 1 hour after he throws and see what strength loss you have. You got to keep it less than a 10% loss, right? So that's the true way to know what you're conditioned for, number 1. Number 2, I've gone to tournaments after tournaments after tournaments over 10 years, and I can probably count on one hand in total the number of teams that I've seen that warm up with a band routine. 10 years of tournaments total, all in, less than 5 teams I've seen as a team. Now, I've seen 2 guys do it as a team, right? So you can't get conditioned for those high pitch counts if you're not doing an arm care program. And again, I'm not a big fan of cookie cutter arm care programs, right? Like, like Jaeger bands as an example. I call them cookie cutter because they have everybody doing the same thing. Where with armcare.com, you get on the app and you do a test, it determines where your weaknesses are. So you're able then to go out and work out and tell like the app what you're doing throwing wise, and it's going to prescribe you exercises based on your weaknesses to shore those weaknesses up, whether that's internal rotation, external rotation, things of that nature. But back to the MLB part. So MLB, their numbers for pitch counts are about 15 to 20 pitches higher than what I put out there. And again, it gives a lot of coaches excuses to throw kids that many pitches, right? But what parents need to do, parents need to look at their kid like their car, right? If your car is going to go 200,000 miles and then it's going to be done, do you want your car to hit 200,000 miles as a high school sophomore? Or do you want to hit 200,000 miles? Let's just say they make it to the minor leagues or major leagues at the end of their career when they're done, when it's their choice to be done, right? Like, we don't want that car to blow up in the prime, extremely fun time of high school or college. And that's the risk that you run by using these higher numbers is you're adding to those stress levels over time. And it's just, what I always say with MLB pitch counts is if you're going to count every pitch before the game in warmups, if you're going to count every pitch between innings, then use MLB pitch counts. But people don't do that. People don't count how many warm-up throws they have before the game. They don't count the 5 or 6 they throw between innings. They don't count all that. You throw, let's call it 5 pitches between innings, and you throw 6 innings. That's an extra 30 pitches. Much less the 30 pitches you threw before the game. Because most coaches aren't out there saying, "Hey, After 10 or 12, shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're just getting a feel for it. You're not trying to, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not trying to throw 30 pitches before the game, but that's what happens. I've seen it all the time. They throw 30 pitches, they come in, they throw 80, and then they've thrown 30 pitches in between the innings. So in reality, they've thrown 140 pitches, but the ones they've counted has been 80. And then they go, oh, Pitch Smart says I can do 80. Right? So that's why I say if you're going to look at in-game pitch counts, that's why our numbers are 15 to 20 lower, because it kind of takes into consideration all that.
Right.
But listen, you can't even use pitch count guidelines if you are not in some sort of strength program. And I'm not just saying armbands, but just you got to be doing something strength-wise all the time, because it is such a stressful, taxing thing to do to throw a baseball on your body. Just ask me. I'm 43 and I didn't even want to get out of bed this morning. I had like a 3-hour tryout. I helped 12U have a tryout, and I feel awful, because baseball's been so hard on my body up for the 20 years that I played.
Right. No, that's great stuff, and that's a pretty good point that you brought up about they don't count the throws that they make before they pitch, when they pitch in between innings. So everything adds up to me. So okay. So now next thing I wanted to ask, now that you're talking about how to take care of your arm. So what would you recommend for a lot of people right now? Is the off season is about to start? Because
this is a great question. I know where you're going. Keep going.
Right. So what do you recommend for pitchers? Do you recommend them to continue to pitch in the off season, or what do you recommend the off season workout should be?
All baseball players need to not throw a baseball for 8 weeks. Okay. So you kind of got to do some math and figure out when you need to be ready in spring. So if you're going to start playing, let's say mid-March, okay? So you also need a 10-week ramp-up program, a throwing program, okay? So if I work backwards from mid-March, 10 weeks, that's January 1, okay? If I go backwards from January 1, 8 weeks for no throwing, that's November 1, right? So we're in November right now. So no throwing in November, no throwing in December. Okay. January 1, they should start a 10-week throwing program. Okay. What we do is we start our strength program where guys 12U and below are doing med ball work, body weight work, arm care work through those 10 weeks with the very slow ramp up throwing program. It's all integrated into one, right? Guys that are 13 and up swap out body weight for weightlifting. Okay. So no throwing November to January 1. Then you're going to slowly ramp up your throwing and it's going to be different intervals, right? It's going to be what we call light catch, which is like base distance, close, nice and easy. Then you got something called regular throw. That's a little further back than base distance, but it's not even close to your max. Then you have long toss, so it's your max. Then you have bullpen days. So you have all those different things that are kind of stair-stepped into those 10 weeks. So by mid-March, your guys are ready to throw a 50-pitch bullpen. Okay. And when I say a 50-pitch bullpen, here's another thing. Kids should not be throwing more than 20 pitches in a bullpen without 5 minutes of rest between. So you need to simulate innings. So if we're throwing a 50-pitch bullpen, that looks like 15, 15, 20. So 15 pitches, 5-minute break like your team went to hit. 15 pitches, 5-minute break like your team went to hit. 20 pitches. It's not 50 all in a row, because what happens is if you try to throw 50 pitches all at once, you get extremely tired. And studies show that when you're fatigued is the number one cause of injury.
Right.
Because fatigue makes you try to overcompensate, so you stride less. So there's a study that says if you stride less, it puts different forces on your arm, which increases injury risk. So strength is the most important thing there is. And it's full body strength, rotational strength, and it's obviously arm care strength.
So maybe I missed this part, but from November until January. Do you do any type of bands at all, or
Yeah. So you do bands like year round.
okay,
Like when I say no throwing, you're still doing, like if you're in the arm care app, it's still going to give you, stuff to do that day. But yeah, so we kind of have our own thing that we do, like January 1 strength wise, that we build the arm care platform into that. But yeah, so it's November, December is not, hey, it's the holidays, I'm not going to do anything and I'm just going to eat and put on like fat
right,
weight, right? It is, some of these guys are playing basketball, some of these guys are wrestling, right? So the
right,
guys that aren't doing those two things, or maybe even playing football that deep, those are the guys that need to be doing some type of strength and conditioning, full body, like on their own. Find a youth speed and agility program to go do, right? So
mm-hmm.
all of those things, all of that strength work is going to give you more velo.
Okay,
The arm care and the bands are going to give you a little bit of velo, but they're going to give you an immense amount of arm protection. And here's what I mean by that. We had a guy that, our number one, this is like years ago, like we we're probably 10 or 11U, and he would throw 50 pitches, right? And then the next day I'd be like, hey, man, how do you feel soreness wise, just in your arm and your lat? And he'd be like, man, I'm like a 6 or 7. I'm really sore. Like I would ask him on Monday.
mm-hmm.
Then we started doing the arm care program, and we had him in that for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months every single day. And then we would pitch and he would throw 50 pitches. And I would ask him, hey, how are you feeling? He goes, I'm like a 1 on the soreness scale. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
Like I was like, and then it made sense, right? Like when you work out, muscles
Right.
get stronger. So if this gets stronger, this is able to absorb more force.
Right.
So sure, I should be less sore after 50 pitches because I'm more conditioned for the 50 pitches.
Right.
I haven't been in a weight room in a really long time. If I go in there today and work out like I did 3 years ago, I'm not going to be able to walk tomorrow.
Right.
Right. But if I'd been working out for 3 or 4 months and I go in one day and work out, I'm not going to be very sore the next day. It's the same principle.
Yeah. And I don't mean to go off topic here, but now that you said that, if you got a kid that's not really doing any of this stuff, I kind of want to hear what you got to say about this. But sometimes the kids will be throwing a bunch of pitches out there, and the coach will ask them, "How do you feel?" "Oh, I feel great."
Yeah.
But the next day, it's
mm-hmm.
their arm is on the ground, like it's just dragging. Yep. So what's your take on that one?
So I mean, if you really want to dive into like why that's the case, is these kids are creating these micro tears in their muscle, and those micro tears, more of them, and they're going to get bigger as they stress their body out for what they're not able to handle, right? So that's why they feel like garbage the next day. And lactic acid is not the cause of soreness, okay? It's the repair. You actually have muscle stem cells that go in and actually create new cells to fill in those tears. And that creation causes inflammation, which causes soreness. So it's not lactic acid, right? Mm-hmm. So the more that you micro tear those muscles because you stressed it more than you were ready for, that's the reason why you're so sore.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Because I mean, I just feel like coaches need to be careful with that.
Yeah,
because they
need to understand that, not just take listen, I was a pitcher, and you would have to like drag me off the mound because I wanted to compete so hard.
Right.
But you got to my desire to compete was more than my desire to keep myself healthy. I just wanted to compete and pitch. That's all I wanted to do. Right. You can leave me out there all day long. That's all I wanted to do. And there's going to be kids like that a coach is going to have to go out there and pull off the mound.
Right. I had a kid. It's funny because you say that, because I had a kid. He was 16 a couple years ago, and I had him pitching, and he was already up there pitch count. And so I asked him, "How do you feel?" And he's like, "I feel great." I'm like, "Well, I want you to stay that way."
Right.
Because if we keep pushing it, we're just going to make it worse. And then tomorrow,
think about, okay, so he feels great in the second game of pool play, right?
Right.
Is that guy going to play defense tomorrow and have to throw?
Right.
With some soreness? with some arm fatigue and body fatigue. Those
Yeah.
are the things that a lot of coaches don't take into consideration with pitch count. So Pitch Smart says I can throw 80. We threw 80 in pool play, but now that kid has to play 5 or 6 games defensively the next day. You got to average. That's why our pitch counts are lower for our youth guys, because we understand that not only are they pitching, but they're playing defense and everything else. There was a game when we were 11U that I pitched a guy 65 pitches, and that was a lot for 11U. And we needed it to get through that game. And I told him, and between innings, before he got up to that number, I said, I will let you go one more inning and finish this game out. But if you cross 60, I want to not play you defensively the rest of the tournament. And it's one of our best defenders. And he's like, I'm okay with that. I'm like, okay, let's go. Right? But a lot of coaches, their teams aren't structured to where they can do that, because that will put them in a bind or put them at a disadvantage to win the tournament, because they don't have the structure to be able to move guys around.
Right.
So yeah, it was bad not having that guy out there, but I mean, the next day that tournament doesn't matter, much less today.
Right. And now, just to be clear, like, I don't want coaches to feel like, well, they don't even care about winning, which we do. We still
want to win every
compete.
single game, but not at the expense of a kid.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to during season, what do you recommend the kids? So how do we keep them in how do we keep their arms healthy for the whole season?
I keep talking about the arm care app, so I'll kind of talk about how that kind of works during the season. So you'll have like a warm up. So what they call it prep, right? So you'll have like a prep or a warm up before practice with the armbands and the hip and core band before the game or before the practice. You'll go do your throwing. And then after your throwing, so throwing being practice, throwing being I pitched in a game, throwing being I played in a game, throwing being I just, I just had like a bullpen day. Then it's going to give you your custom training. So you're able to get in there and click the custom button, and it's going to tell you, based on what you did today, this is what you need to do. And it asks questions like, let's say I didn't pitch today. It's going to ask you, is there a chance you could pitch tomorrow? Yes, no, maybe. Right? Or if you did pitch, it's going to ask you, how many pitches did you throw? So it kind of knows, based on their algorithms and based on your age, like what to prescribe you. Like maybe it's the recovery work. Because what a lot of people don't understand, like with the Jaeger bands as an example, is usually they're only going one direction, right? Like they're starting here and going here. Okay, so it's kind of like think about bench pressing, right? I'm really focused on pushing up and then I let it drop. What the recovery side of this band work with arm care is the negative side of the exercise. So like with a row, instead of going back to pinch and then kind of letting it out and then going back to pinch, I'm going back to pinch and I'm taking 6 seconds and I'm resisting. So you've got pull, like I've got where I'm pulling and then it's pulling against me and I'm resisting in the opposite direction. So your muscles work in both ways, right? So we have to, if you think about what happens when you throw, like that's why it's important.
Right.
Working those muscles in both directions and strengthening up both the, your accelerators and your decelerating muscles.
Right. Yeah. And after I got those bands and everything from you, like some of the kids don't like it very much after they pitch and they want to go home, but I force them to do their especially the recovery bands or section. When
those are the kids that will come to you at 16 and go, thank you for making me do it. See, the problem with bands, and I had some conversations with the guys at Arm Care, and I'm like, I've been through it. I've had the problems. I've installed their program with my now 14-year-old team. I'm seeing a lot of great things. And, and it's just, I don't know, man, like I'm just such a big believer in the arm care stuff that the problem with the reason why guys don't do it is the same reason that they probably don't work on fielding enough. Because hitting cage bombs is more fun than doing arm care stuff when there's no one around you watching. There's no one to see you do it.
Right.
And if there's no one to see you do it, the great players are okay with that, right? But the players that are just kind of, they're not 100% bought in, they don't like working. They like playing the game. They don't like the practice. But to play the game, you got to do all the things to prepare you to be able to perform in that game.
Right.
And arm care is probably the biggest piece of that. I have my 5-year-old team. When our guys are 7, these guys are going to do it every day. And if you're not doing it, you're not on my team.
Right.
It's that simple. Because I believe that much in it. I don't want somebody not doing it, and we get to 9, and they have they have an arm problem, and now that hurts my reputation.
Right.
Because they see it came from me. This arm problem at 9, 10, 11 came from me. But what they don't know is this guy did nothing that I told him to do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny that you say that, because sometimes when we finish games like way too late, and I ain't
It
gonna
takes
like
5 minutes, bro. You've been there
Right.
all day. What's 5 more minutes?
Well, and like, let's say we finish up a game and it's raining or something, we gotta go. So when for some reason when I go home, I'm thinking, is he gonna do the bands? Is he really gonna do it when he gets home? But obviously, that's
Let me tell you my mindset of a professional athlete.
Right.
Okay. You tell me it's raining. Do you know what my very first thought process was? Are your dugouts covered? Do your dugouts have chain link hookups?
Right. Yeah.
Like, how bad do you want it?
Right. That's a good point.
Find a way. I had a leader in business one time, and he had a great saying: find a way to win. Find a way to get it done. Parents wouldn't say, hey, it's raining outside, I'm not going to pay my mortgage.
That's a good point. Yep.
Find a way to get it done.
Right. No, that's awesome stuff, man. I kind of want to, if you don't mind, wrap it up with 4 questions that I normally ask everyone.
Okay.
Which, by the way, this has been amazing information that you've hopefully people is stuck around till this point, because I feel like it's important that a lot of parents and coaches hear this stuff. But so let's go ahead and wrap it up with 4 questions here. So if you think back to your favorite team, you don't have to say name or age group, but if you think back to your favorite team that you've coached over all these years, what's the team that you enjoyed the most, and why? Or coaching the most?
Oh, goodness. So it's probably a team that doesn't have any negative Nancy's on it, number one, right?
Right.
Like, skill level, you're always going to have a couple guys that are on the bottom, but those guys find ways to talk the team up, right? Those guys find ways to will the team to win from the dugout, on the base paths. They're being a pit bull, right? So this team had a couple of those guys on it. They were not anywhere near the guys that were top skill-wise, but they contributed to the team differently, And the season before that with this team, we had a couple negative Nancy's on it, right? Like, they would hit a ball and not get on base, and they would be tossing their helmet or flipping their bat in the dugout or stomping on first base if somebody made a great play in the outfield, and it was just really refreshing when we didn't have that on the team. And everybody just went out and executed. Like, we have a lot of stuff that we do that takes a lot of work, first and third situations and all that. And it's just really great to see all that come together.
Right.
It just feels really good as a coach and go, man, like, these guys are performing at a high level. And that team, was probably one of the best teams that we've ever had.
Right.
Record wise and everything else.
What about favorite coach? I mean, coach now. Favorite player. Not, you don't have to say names, but what would be your favorite player on a team?
Man, I have a couple, and the traits are the same. I'm talking to them. Their eyes are locked on my eyes. I'm talking about they just made a mistake, right? And you got kids that hang their heads and these guys just made a mistake. We're coaching in the moment, and sometimes we're like face to face, real close. They're locking eyes on me, and I'm explaining to them what they should have done in that situation. And there is no feeling of, God, he's getting on to me. They are like, tell me what to do so I can be better next time. Locked eyes on me, soaking it in, every syllable. And as I'm talking to them, they're like, got it, coach. Yes, coach. Got it, coach. Right? Like, that is my favorite player.
That's awesome. What about your least favorite player?
Well, let's talk about the opposite of that, right? So, it's a guy that, I go out and talk to, maybe on the mound, or, that one really sticks out to me. I'm talking to a guy on the mound. He's struggling a little bit, and I'm going out there to pep talk him and kind of give him a little mechanical help. Right. And I'm looking him like dead in the eye, and he's looking over my shoulder. And instead of, the whole time, and going, right. Right. And just, so it's the same, talk about being coachable. Like, I go back, and I don't like yell and scream at my guys, but you go back to like that NFL video they had like a year ago, where that coach is just screaming and yelling and just, as mad as he can be. And that NFL football player is just staring him right in the eye going, got it. Understand. Got it. Right? Like, I'm not saying coaches should coach like that. That's NFL. But it's that same, like, I don't care what you're saying to me. I'm gonna own my mistake, and I'm gonna go do better next time. I'm gonna try to do what you said to do. But then the guys that I don't like are the guys that I try to teach that are like, man, I know it. Like, I'm gonna keep doing it my way. Okay. Keep doing it your way. Keep hitting, 150, and you'll just keep moving down in the lineup, because you were hitting 600 as a leadoff, and now you're batting 11 hole. Right.
It goes in one ear, out the next.
Yeah.
Now, the last one I got for you, it's what's your favorite parent on a team?
The one that brings the most snacks. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's a T-ball joke. My favorite parent is the parent that is committed to continuing their learning of baseball with their player, right? Like, I'll do hitting camps, and I'll explain this to parents. I say, listen, like, I'm giving you these videos to watch after this hitting camp of everything we covered today, so you as a parent can understand it. So now you can go help your kid, right? You may not be an expert at it, but you're going to be way better off understanding wise than where you are today. And I think that's so key. Like, if you just have a parent that takes a kid to lessons once a week, I had kids doing lessons, and you probably had this too. You do a lesson with them once a week for 2 years, and they're the same player. I'm like, why are we still working on the same stuff? I had this conversation with a kid and the parent a couple of years ago. I'm like, dude, you're 11. Why are we still working on the same stuff we've been working on for a year? Well, it's because when I get home, I go out and, I flip on the TV, and I don't go hit off the tee for 5 minutes like you asked me to do. And the parent's not the nudger. Parents, up until probably like 12, like, parents have to be like, hey, like, don't you think we should go outside and play catch? Don't you think we should go outside and maybe throw the tennis ball off the wall? Don't you think we should go outside and I'll throw you pop flies?
Right.
So that's the parent that's going to make a successful baseball player. The parent that's involved. So that's the parents that I like.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree, because that's, at the end of the day, it's what's best for the player. But you gotta be able to put in the work afterwards. So, well, man, I appreciate you for your time. This has been great, awesome information for coaches, players, and parents out there. Hopefully, people stuck around till this point. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I will put your link in the description for if you guys will like to follow Justin OKC Academy on Facebook. I'll also put the website link below. And what else can they find you?
I'll give them the link to the pitch count guidelines that armcare.com has out there.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
basically, when I found armcare.com and I started talking to them, I'm like, okay, what's your pitch counts? And I compared theirs to mine, and it was like, it's like we were working on the same stuff. It was great. So I'm in lockstep with those guys.
No, that's awesome. Now, once again, man, I appreciate you. And if you guys are watching this on YouTube, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and remember, keep it Moy Style. Hey guys, Moy Style Baseball here. If you're interested in infield camp or team infield camp around the nation, just shoot me a text at 251-509-3815. Or you can also email me at moystyle33@gmail.com. Keep it Moy Style.